Look, what I'm about to lay out for you in this video is not speculation. This is not theory. This is a documented pattern of behavior from a man who has completely lost his grip on reality, and I mean that with every ounce of sincerity I possess. Because what Drake is doing right now, at this exact moment in his career, is something we have never witnessed from a mainstream artist of his caliber. He is publicly, visibly, and with zero shame, stalking the attention of a man who has told him in every language possible, through silence, through absence, through deliberate avoidance, that the relationship is over. And not just over. Dead. Buried. Cremated. And yet he keeps showing up to the funeral with flowers, expecting a conversation. That is not resilience. That is not strategy. That is obsession in its rawest, most uncomfortable form, and everybody sees it except the one person who refuses to look in the mirror. But before we even get into the specifics of what just happened at that NOCTA event, and trust me, when I tell you the details are worse than anything you've imagined, I am underselling it. I need you to understand the full scope of what's been happening here. Because this is not a single incident. This is a campaign. A sustained, months-long, multi-pronged campaign to force LeBron James into acknowledging his existence, and it has failed at every single turn. Every single attempt. Every single angle. Every single channel through which he has tried to reach this man has been met with the same response, which is absolutely nothing. Complete void. Total blackout. And instead of taking the hint, instead of reading the room, instead of doing what any self-respecting grown adult would do and simply moving on with their life, the escalation has been relentless. To the point where we are now watching a man in his late 30s publicly melt down over another man in his late 30s who simply does not want to be his friend anymore. And that is a sentence I never thought I would have to say about someone who once sat on top of the entire music industry. So here's where we are. Drake recently hosted the NOCTA Manor event, which is his collaborative project with Nike, and on the surface, this should have been a straightforward brand launch. A celebration of a new paddle collection. An opportunity to show that the business infrastructure is still intact, that the corporate partnerships are still flowing, that the mogul side of the operation is still functional. But that is not what happened. What happened is that this event, a public, documented, heavily photographed event, was used as a vehicle for the most embarrassingly petty stunt I have ever seen a celebrity of his stature pull. Custom shirts were made, printed specifically for this occasion. And on those shirts was a phrase that I need you to really sit with for a moment, because the implications are staggering. The shirts read, "The only LeBron I rate is Juan." Now, for those who don't know, and I wouldn't expect most people to know this, because it's an incredibly niche reference, Juan LeBron is a professional padel player. A professional padel player from Spain who is associated with the Nike brand and who was in attendance at this event. And the reason he was there is because the NOCTA collection is a padel collection, so his presence makes logistical sense. But what does not make logistical sense, what makes absolutely zero sense on any rational level, is why Drake felt the need to print a shirt that specifically, deliberately, and unmistakably references LeBron by name in order to declare that he prefers a different person who happens to share that name. Think about the level of thought that went into this. Someone, whether it was him or someone on his team, had to sit down and conceptualize this. They had to design the shirt. They had to approve the design. They had to get it printed. They had to bring it to the venue. And it had to be worn in front of cameras, in front of guests, in front of Kevin Durant and Sexy Red and whoever else was in that room, knowing full well that the entire purpose of the garment was to send a message to a man who was thousands of miles away and almost certainly did not care. That is not a joke. That is not banter. That is a cry for help disguised as a power move. And the tragic part is that it doesn't even work as a power move. It works as the exact opposite. Because when you take a picture with another man whose name happens to be LeBron, and you print a shirt dedicated to the comparison between this man and the actual LeBron James, you are not showing strength. You are showing the entire world that he occupies so much space in your head that you cannot even host a branded event for your own company without finding a way to make it about him. LeBron lives in Drake's head. And I don't mean that in the casual, throwaway way that people use that phrase on social media. I mean he has a permanent residence there. a mansion, a basketball court on the grounds, a 30-acre estate with a guest house and a helipad. An entire civilization has been built inside that brain, and the eviction notices keep getting sent but never opened. And here's what makes this even more painful to watch. LeBron has not said a word. Not one single word. Through all of this, through every diss, every freestyle, every altered lyric, every sneak subtweet, every event stunt, the silence has been so complete and so consistent that it has become its own form of communication. He is speaking volumes by saying nothing. And that nothing is louder than anything that could ever be printed on a shirt. Because silence from a man of that stature is not absence. It is a deliberate choice. It is a man who has looked at the situation, assessed what is being thrown at him, and decided that none of it merits a response. Not a freestyle. Not a press conference comment. Not a social media post. Not even a sideways glance. He looked at everything and essentially said, I have a legacy to build, a family to protect, a championship to chase, and a Hall of Fame speech to prepare. I do not have bandwidth for this. And that, frankly, is the most devastating response possible because it denies Drake the one thing he is desperately seeking, which is engagement. Any engagement. Even negative engagement. Even a clapback. Even a subliminal. Anything that would confirm that he knows the rapper exists and is affected by what is being done. And that has been denied completely. Now, there's something else that happened recently that I think is critical to understanding the psychology at play here. A few weeks back, a clip went viral of LeBron doing a dance, the Shaw Bang meme, with Richard Jefferson during some coverage. It was a lighthearted, goofy moment. Two guys who know each other from their Cavaliers days goofing around on camera. That's all it was. The NBA star is someone who enjoys music, enjoys having fun, enjoys the moment. But the internet being what it is, that clip got passed around, and I have to imagine that when Drake saw it, something inside him broke a little more. Because here's what I think happened in his mind when that clip surfaced. I think he saw the dance, the fun, the loose and joyful energy, and thought, maybe even for a split second, that this was about him. That this was somehow signaling something. That the dance was a reference, a nod, a crack in the wall. Because when you are this deep in obsession, everything becomes a sign. Every gesture is a message. Every public moment is a coded communication directed at you. That is how obsessive minds work. They pattern match everything to the object of their fixation. And I would bet everything I own that clip was watched multiple times, analyzed, searched for meaning that was never there, hoping that finally, this was the moment of acknowledgement. And it wasn't. It was just a man dancing with his friend. That's all it ever was. Now let me take you back, because to really understand how we got here, you need to see the full timeline. And when you see the timeline laid out, the pattern becomes undeniable. These two were once close. Not acquaintances. Not casual associates. Close. They were seen together at parties, at games, at events. There was a tattoo, an actual permanent tattoo on skin of the Fighting Irish high school jersey, number 23, St. Vincent, St. Mary's. That is the level of admiration and connection that once existed. You don't put another man's high school jersey on your body permanently unless that relationship means something profound. And for years, it did. They were part of each other's worlds. The crossover between hip-hop and basketball that everyone pointed to as the gold standard of celebrity friendship. And then everything changed. The Kendrick Lamar beef happened. And when Not Like Us dropped and the entire world exploded, sides were chosen. And LeBron chose his side. Not with a press release. Not with a statement. He chose the way he does everything, publicly, visibly, and with maximum cultural impact. He showed up to the pop-out concert. He was there. In the building. Visible. Documented. And not just him. Savannah James was there too. His wife. The woman who would later be dragged into rumors about his personal life. She was right there, alongside her husband, and they were both visibly, unapologetically vibing to Kendrick's music. Savannah was spotted wearing PG Lang merchandise. She was rapping along to Not Like Us, the song that was explicitly designed to humiliate Drake. And she was doing it with joy. with genuine, unforced, unmistakable joy. That image of LeBron and Savannah turning up to a Kendrick diss track, that image was a nuclear detonation in the world of celebrity relationships. It said everything without saying anything. It said, "We are not with you. We were never as close as you thought. And we are comfortable demonstrating that publicly." And Drake never recovered from it. That is the honest truth. He never recovered from the pop-out. He never recovered from seeing his former friend in that audience, vibing to a song that called him a pedophile. He never recovered from Savannah in her PG Lang gear, making it clear that the entire James household had made their choice. And everything that has happened since, every diss track, every freestyle, every altered lyric, every NOCTA shirt, every desperate attempt to get attention, all of it traces back to that night. To the pop-out. To the moment he realized that the friendship he thought he had was not what he thought it was, and that the man he had immortalized on his skin had chosen Kendrick's side over his. And here's the thing that I don't think has ever been confronted, which is the possibility that this was always a one-sided relationship. That what Drake interpreted as a deep, brother-level bond was, from the other man's perspective, a casual celebrity friendship, the kind you have with someone you see at events and enjoy spending time with, but never consider foundational to your life. LeBron has a wife, children, a decades-long career, a tight inner circle of actual childhood friends and trusted advisors. The rapper was an accessory to that world, not a pillar of it. And the pop-out proved it. Because if that friendship had been valued the way Drake thought it was, that concert would never have been attended. Savannah would never have been photographed in PG Lang. The neutral route, staying home, staying quiet, would have been taken. But it wasn't. The opposite happened. And that tells you everything about how much this friendship actually meant, which is significantly less than it meant to the man who tattooed its symbol on his arm. Which brings me to the Iceman album, because we need to talk about what happened musically. On the track, Make Them Remember, the original line from Nonstop, "How I Go From 6 to 23 Like I'm LeBron," was changed. Flipped. A compliment turned into a diss. How I go from 6 to 23 but not LeBron, man. That is a deliberate, calculated alteration of a years-old lyric specifically designed to send a message. And the message is, I am no longer honoring you. I am no longer praising you. I am actively distancing myself from the association. But here's the problem with that as a strategy. When you go out of your way to alter a lyric that was originally a compliment, you are not showing independence. You are showing that the person you're altering the lyric about still controls your creative output. He is so present in Drake's mind that he cannot even perform his own back catalog without finding a way to make it about that man. He had to go back to a song from 2018 and surgically modify it to reflect his current emotional state regarding someone who, again, has not said his name in public. And it didn't stop there. There was the Fighting Irish Freestyle before the album even dropped. Another not-so-subtle jab, with bars about how the world fell in love with the gimmicks. Even my brothers got tickets, seemed like they loved every minute. The brothers in that line, everyone understood who that was about. It was about the people Drake felt betrayed him during the Kendrick beef. It was about LeBron. It was about DeRozan. It was about everyone who showed up to the pop-out and made him feel like the entire industry had turned its back on him. And instead of processing that like a mature adult, it was channeled into a freestyle that essentially accused former friends of being sellouts for enjoying Kendrick's music. Which is an extraordinary position to take. You are essentially saying, if you listen to the guy who dissed me, you are a traitor. That is not friendship. That is a demand for loyalty that was never agreed to. No one signed a contract saying they would only listen to approved music for the rest of their life. LeBron is a grown man who enjoys music, and he enjoyed Kendrick's music, and he went to a concert, and that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a crusade. And the crusade has led us to the NOCTA event, which is where we are now, and which is where the desperation reached levels that I genuinely did not think were possible. Because the shirt stunt, the only LeBron I raid as Juan, is not an isolated incident. It is the culmination of a pattern. It is the logical endpoint of a man who has tried everything else and failed. Music was tried. Dissing on wax was tried. No response. The freestyle was tried. No response. Changing lyrics during live performances was tried. No response. Unfollowing and subtweeting was tried. No response. And so, having exhausted every conventional channel, the turn was made to performance art. To stunts. To printing a shirt that names another human being by comparison to the human being who is actually the target. And the question that every single person watching this should be asking is, what does Drake think this accomplishes? Does he think LeBron is going to see this shirt and suddenly feel compelled to respond? Does he think a picture of Juan LeBron is going to make someone think, wow, he's really moved on, I should reach out? Or does he think, and this is the most likely scenario, that any reaction at all, even mockery, even dismissal, even a sideways comment in an interview, would be better than the silence he's currently getting? Because if that's the thinking, then what we are watching is not strategy. We are watching a man who has confused negative attention with connection, who has decided that being mocked is preferable to being ignored. And that is a profoundly sad place to be. The copium on display here is industrial strength. This is not someone rationalizing a minor setback. This is someone constructing an alternate reality where wearing a passive-aggressive t-shirt to your own brand event constitutes a win. Now let me talk about the cast of characters at this event, because the guest list tells its own story. Kevin Durant was there. KD and Drake go back over a decade. KD is one of the very few people from the past who has remained consistently in his corner through all of this. Through the Kendrick beef, through the public humiliation, through the legal petitions, through the industry-wide side-eye, KD has stayed loyal. And on one level, you have to respect that. Loyalty is a rare commodity in the entertainment industry, and KD has demonstrated it. But on another level, you have to ask what KD is thinking when he's standing at an event watching his friend of over a decade wear a shirt that is so obviously, so transparently, so pathetically designed to get the attention of a man who wants nothing to do with him. Does KD pull him aside? Does KD say, bro, maybe don't do this? Or does KD just stand there and let it happen because he's learned that the advice doesn't get taken anymore? Because one thing that has become clear over the course of this entire saga is that Drake is not surrounded by people who tell him the truth. He is surrounded by people who tell him what he wants to hear. And that is the most dangerous environment for any human being to operate in, let alone one who is already spiraling. And then there's Sexy Red. She was at the event too, and her presence is worth discussing because it speaks to the broader pattern of social life post-beef. Since the Kendrick fallout, there has been aggressive relationship building, new friendships, new associations. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. People evolve, circles change, life moves forward. But the way it's being done raises questions. Every new friendship looks transactional. Every new association looks like a calculated move to replace the people who have been lost. Sexy Red, in particular, has drawn criticism because people feel like the association is being used for cultural credibility. That the connection isn't organic but strategic, a way to maintain a certain kind of relevance that is increasingly difficult to sustain on musical merit alone. And whether that's fair or not, the perception exists, and in the court of public opinion, perception is reality. When every friendship you form is scrutinized for its strategic value rather than its authenticity, that tells you something about the trust deficit you've created. People don't question genuine friendships. They question transactions. And the fact that the only person from the old days still consistently visible is KD. Everybody else in that NOCTA photo is either brand new, signed to a brand deal, or connected through a business arrangement. That tells you everything about the state of the social infrastructure. It's been rebuilt from scratch with corporate partners instead of genuine friends, and the foundation is sand. And that brings me to what I think is the core issue here, which is the bridge burning. There is a song on the album called Burning Bridges. And the reason that title resonates is because it's not metaphorical. It's literal. Bridges have been systematically burned, alienated, pushed away, fallen out with a staggering number of people over the past few years. The people who were in the circle when this career started, many of them are gone. Not because life naturally took them in different directions, but because behavior made it impossible for them to stay. The LeBron situation is the most visible example, but it's not the only one. There's the Kendrick fallout. There's the DeRozan tension. There's the broader industry shift where a significant portion of hip-hop has moved away and toward Kendrick, not because of a marketing campaign, but because of a genuine cultural reassessment of what Drake represents and what he has always represented. And the response to that reassessment has been to double down, to escalate, to sue, to petition, to diss, to freestyle, to print shirts. Rather than taking a step back and asking, what am I doing that's causing all of these people to leave? The decision has been made that the problem is everyone else, that he is the victim, that the world turned unfairly. And that narrative, the victim narrative, is the most toxic possible framework for self-reflection because it closes every door to growth. Now I want to talk about something that deserves real scrutiny, which is the rumor-mongering about LeBron's personal life. Because at some point during the fallout, Drake, or people in his orbit, which at this point is a distinction without a difference, began pushing narratives about the marriage, about infidelity, about what went on at parties, about Savannah. And let me be very clear about why this matters. If you had a genuine friendship with someone and that friendship ended, the decent thing to do, the human thing to do, is to walk away and keep your mouth shut about their personal life. You don't go public with rumors about a marriage. You don't try to home wreck from the outside. You don't weaponize private information as a revenge tactic. That is not what a friend does. That is what a spiteful, vindictive, obsessive ex does. And I use that comparison deliberately because the behavior pattern is identical. The inability to let go. The need to retaliate. The impulse to damage the other person's life because they had the audacity to stop being in yours. That is textbook obsessive behavior, and the fact that it's coming from a man with this level of resources, this level of platform, and this level of influence makes it not just sad, but genuinely concerning. Savannah didn't do anything. Savannah was just a wife supporting her husband's musical taste. And for that, she got dragged into a public smear campaign because her husband's former friend couldn't handle rejection. And Savannah James, let's talk about her role in this, because she's not a peripheral figure. She has been very clear about where she stands. She was at the pop-out. She was wearing PG Lang. She was rapping along to Not Like Us with visible enthusiasm. And I can only imagine how relieved she was when it became clear that the ties were being cut. Because if you're married to someone, and that someone has a friend who is later going to try to spread rumors about your marriage as retaliation for a friendship ending, you would want that person out of your life too. She didn't just lose a friend's friend. She dodged a bullet. She saw what Drake was capable of when crossed, and she made sure that her family was as far from that blast radius as possible. And LeBron, to his credit, followed her lead. He chose his family over a celebrity friendship. He chose his household over a man who would later try to destabilize that household with gossip. And that is not a complicated moral decision. That is the easiest decision in the world. You protect your family. You don't protect the feelings of a man who would throw your marriage under the bus because he's mad you went to a concert. Here's another layer to this that I think people are missing. LeBron is not Jay-Z. And what I mean by that is, the response to Drake is not going to come the way Jay-Z would respond. Jay-Z would make a record. Jay-Z would craft a subliminal. Jay-Z would use his platform to address the situation with words, with bars, with strategic public commentary. That is Jay-Z's mode of engagement. But LeBron operates on an entirely different frequency. The mode of engagement here is silence. The mode is presence, showing up where you want to show up, supporting who you want to support, and letting the optics speak for themselves. There is no need to diss the rapper because indifference is a far more powerful weapon than any verse could ever be. A diss track acknowledges that the other person matters enough to address. Silence says they don't matter at all. And for someone who has built an entire career on being acknowledged, on being referenced, on being central to the cultural conversation, silence is the one weapon that has no defense. You cannot clap back at nothing. You cannot respond to a void. You cannot craft a counter-narrative to a person who simply refuses to participate in the narrative. Rich Paul, LeBron's longtime friend and agent, even weighed in diplomatically when asked, suggesting that people can reconcile their differences, but that was Rich Paul being a professional. The reality on the ground is that reconciliation requires two willing parties, and only one party is showing up to the table. And I think that's what's driving the spiral. Not the beef itself. Not the loss to Kendrick. Not even the pop-out. What's driving it is the realization that there is no leverage. With Kendrick, there was a back and forth. There were tracks being exchanged. There was a dialogue, even if it was a hostile one. There was engagement. But here, there is nothing. A brick wall. And things keep being thrown at it: diss tracks, freestyles, shirts, events, interviews, and every single thing bounces off and lands at the thrower's feet. There is nothing to work with. No quote to analyze. No clip to respond to. No subliminal to decode. Just absence. And that absence is consuming everything. Now, the tattoo situation deserves its own moment because it's perhaps the most symbolic element of this entire saga. There was a tattoo of the Fighting Irish jersey on that arm. Number 23. A permanent mark on the body honoring a man who was considered a brother. And after the fallout, what happened? It was covered up. Replaced with a tattoo of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Now, on the surface, you could read this as a clean break. A moving on. A new athlete to support. A replacement of the old with the new. But that reading requires you to ignore the psychological implications, which are enormous. When you cover up a tattoo, you're engaging in an act of erasure. You're saying, this person no longer deserves space on my body. But the very act of erasure confirms the significance of what's being erased. You don't cover up a tattoo of someone who doesn't matter. You cover up a tattoo of someone who matters too much. And the fact that the replacement was another NBA player, another young, ascending NBA star, suggests that this is not erasure. This is substitution. The LeBron-shaped hole is being filled with another athlete, the same way it's being filled with Juan LeBron at the NOCTA event. The names change. The pattern doesn't. And when you pair the tattoo cover-up with the NOCTA shirt, a deeply unsettling picture emerges. There is a systematic attempt to replace LeBron in every context where he previously existed. He was on the arm, replaced with Shai. He was the basketball world connection, replaced with Juan LeBron. He was the friend, replaced with a rotating cast of new associates, many of whom are transactional relationships built on brand partnerships rather than genuine connection. This is not moving on. This is obsession wearing the costume of moving on. And the tragedy is that everyone can see it. Every person who looks at that shirt, every person who sees the tattoo cover up, every person who watches the altered lyrics, they all see the same thing. A man so consumed by the loss of one relationship that his entire public persona has been reshaped around the denial of that loss. Let me also address the broader question of what this means for the career and legacy, because I think we need to zoom out from the specifics and look at the macro picture. For over a decade, the sound of mainstream hip-hop was defined by one person. The most streamed, most discussed, most ubiquitous rapper on the planet. And in the span of roughly 2 years, that position has eroded in ways that I don't think even the harshest critics anticipated. The Kendrick beef was not just a musical defeat. It was a reputational cataclysm. Not Like Us didn't just win a rap battle. It reframed the public's understanding of who Drake is. It took every criticism that had been simmering under the surface for years, the cultural authenticity questions, the ghostwriting allegations, the emotional manipulation patterns, and condensed them into a single, devastating, inescapable anthem that played at every wedding, every club, every sporting event, and every pop-out concert. And the response to that cataclysm has not been to rebuild. It has been to lash out. At Kendrick. At LeBron. At DeRozan. At the industry. At the fans who turned. At the platform that hosted the song. At the label that promoted it. Legal petitions have been filed. Lyrics have been changed. Shirts have been worn. Bridges have been burned with a fervor that suggests the goal is not career repair, but punishment of everyone held responsible for its decline. And that is a fundamental misreading of the situation. Because the people being punished are not the cause of the decline. They are the witnesses to it. LeBron didn't end this career. He went to a concert. Kendrick didn't destroy this legacy. The response to Kendrick is what's destroying it. Every lawsuit, every tantrum, every shirt, every desperate public maneuver chips away at the mystique that took 15 years to build. The version of Drake who sat courtside at Raptors games and made the NBA cool was a different person from the one now printing passive-aggressive merch about a man who won't text back. The distance between those two versions is the distance between a mogul and a meme. And the acceleration toward the latter is increasing with every passing week. Now, I want to be fair here for a moment, because I think nuance matters even in situations like this. Is it possible that the attention-seeking isn't real? Is it possible that the shirt was just a joke, a bit of playful branding that happened to reference a name? Is it possible that the tattoo cover-up was purely aesthetic, that the Iceman lyrics were artistic expression, and that all of this is being overanalyzed by people looking for drama? Theoretically, yes. In isolation, any one of these things could be explained away. But they don't exist in isolation. They exist in sequence. They exist in pattern. And patterns tell stories that individual data points cannot. The pattern here is unambiguous. A man who had a close relationship with another man lost that relationship and has spent every subsequent moment finding new and creative ways to insert that man's name into his public life despite total refusal to engage. That is not a series of coincidences. That is a behavioral profile. And the behavioral profile points to one conclusion. Drake has not accepted the end of this friendship, and he may never accept it. And here's what genuinely troubles me about this. I don't say this as a hater. I don't say this as someone who takes joy in watching another human being struggle. I say this as someone who watches behavior and draws conclusions. We are looking at a man who, by all external indicators, is deeply lonely. The people who were close have been pushed away or lost. New faces surround him who may or may not have his best interests at heart. Public conflicts are being waged with multiple figures simultaneously. Body art is being altered, lyrics are being modified, and public events are being reshaped to reflect emotional states that have not been processed. And the one person whose validation seems most desired, the one person whose attention is desperately sought, has made it unambiguously clear that he has moved on. That is a recipe for a very specific kind of psychological spiral, and we are watching it play out in real time on public platforms with cameras rolling. And the saddest part, the part that I keep coming back to, is that LeBron has already told us how this ends. When he was finally asked about Drake in an interview, the response was measured, courteous, and devastating in its finality. Always wish him the best. Obviously, different places right now, currently. Read that again. Always wish him the best. That is what you say about someone you have fully released. That is the language of closure. It is polite. It is kind. And it is absolute. There is no door left open. There is no invitation to reconnect. There is no, we'll see what happens. There is a man wishing another man well from a distance so great that it might as well be another planet. And that is where LeBron lives now. On another planet. While Drake is still standing at the launch pad, printing shirts about the rocket that already left. So where does this go from here? I'll tell you where I think it goes, and I say this with no pleasure. The escalation will continue. The stunts will get more elaborate, the disses will get more direct, and the public behavior will become more erratic. Not because Drake is a bad person, but because unprocessed losses don't go away on their own. They intensify. They find new outlets. They manifest in increasingly visible ways until the person either hits a wall that forces reflection or runs out of avenues for expression. And LeBron, true to form, will continue to do nothing. He will continue to play basketball. He will continue to build his legacy. He will continue to support the artists he wants to support and attend the events he wants to attend. He will retire someday, and there will be a Hall of Fame induction, and there will be statues in Cleveland and possibly Miami, and when all of that happens, Drake will still be out there somewhere, finding a new LeBron to rate, a new LeBron to tattoo, a new LeBron to print on a shirt. Because the issue was never about LeBron. The issue was always about the inability to let go of someone who let go first. And I genuinely believe, and this is the part that makes this not just a story about celebrity gossip, but a story about human nature, that this dynamic will persist for decades. That when these two men are in their 60s and 70s, if they live that long, one will still be looking for ways to get the other's attention, and the other will still be pretending the first one doesn't exist. That is the trajectory we are on. And nothing I have seen from either party suggests a course correction is coming. And I'll close with this, because I think it's the most important takeaway from all of this. What we're watching is not a beef. It's not a rivalry. It's not even a feud. What we're watching is a man grieve a relationship in the most public, most dysfunctional, most self-destructive way possible. And the fact that the other party has chosen silence as their response does not make it less of a story. It makes it more of one. Because silence, in the end, is the loudest sound in the room. And right now, LeBron's silence is deafening. And Drake can't hear anything else. So I'll throw it to you. I want to hear what you think about all of this. Do you think Drake ever moves on from LeBron? Do you think LeBron ever breaks his silence? Or is this just going to be the story that never ends, two men in their late 30s locked in a dynamic where one won't stop and the other won't start? Drop your thoughts in the comments.